Hi, Susan.
Hello.
Hello. I didn't realize I
I can't hear you.
can't. Oh, let me see. Oh, you can't hear me? That's
Now
not
I
good.
can. Now I can. No. You're good now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to have my mouthpiece. And there's Chanel too. So I thought I was late and I'm early.
I'm so unused to being able to get on before the moment of. I was scared.
Hi, Josh.
Well, I gained an hour. I didn't realize it was an hour late, so it was like a gift. Like, oh my God, I can do all these things. Changing the times on us.
So who needs to be elevated? Who's the presenter?
Is it spring? What is it? Spring or Sullivan? Spring Street.
I know, but what's the name of the name of the person presenting? Who's that?
It's Mr. Hirschberg.
Okay. All right.
And when he comes on, we can ask if there are others. I don't have any others on my
He's
list.
already here as an attendee.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah.
I'll elevate him once you officially start the meeting.
Thank you, Josh.
Sure.
Susan, we have Josh by our side for technical matters.
I'm here for you.
Thanks, Josh.
I got the time.
Josh, is there a way that I can see the participants list without it's taking over the center of the screen?
Oh yeah, you're in full screen right now. That's what that means.
I'm sorry, full attendee list. And it comes up right in the middle and
right.
let
So
me move it.
So that means you're in full screen mode. So you need to close that box and then hit escape. And then if you click on participants, it should show up on the right side of your menu.
Oops. I'm sorry, I lost you now.
Our presenter has his hand raised.
Yes.
Chenault, if you're on your computer, you can go to the top and click on Window in the Zoom screen.
Oh, wait, I'm going to have to sign back on. Okay, I'm here. Carter, do you hear me?
I do, yeah. You can see
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you.
Are you ready to begin, Chanel?
Yes, we do have a quorum. You're ready, Carter?
Yeah, Josh is running. I just
Okay.
had the slides up, so
Right, okay,
the slides up. Great.
Josh,
Yep.
begin the recording when you will, and let me know.
Oh, it's recording already. You're good.
Okay, thank you. This is the Landmarks Committee of Community Board 2, our second meeting of the month. We have one application to consider, 310 Spring Street. I'll read it in just a moment. The procedure is, for those who are unfamiliar, we have the presentation. We'll then have questions and comments from the committee, followed by questions and comments from members of the board who are not on the committee. And then there'll be a general public time for comments and questions. And we'll then have the business session when everyone is welcome to stay, but it's only for the participation of the committee members and the chair of the board. If you would, Josh, please upgrade the presenter. I'll read the application.
All right. Done.
There are actually two additional speakers that need to be upgraded.
Okay, let's sort that out and then I'll read.
Okay. It's Armand and it's also Mark McCarthy.
What was the first name?
Armand Quadrini
Okay.
and Mark McCarthy.
Okay.
Okay, the application is for 310 Spring Street and parcels to the north and south. The application is to restore 310 Spring Street and cut and the rear house. That was a mistake. So it's to restore 310 Spring Street and to build a 10-story residential buildings with ground floor retail space on the plots to the north and the south of the building, and to connect the new buildings with a corridor bridge. Is that your understanding of the correct? Does that sum up correctly your idea of the application? Just note to strike and the rear house. Okay, thank you. If you would start with your presentation, please. And would you please let us know what page you're on? There is maybe one member who's on by telephone and has the application. Thank you.
This is Armand Quadrini from KSQ Design. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
And is it okay to begin?
Yes, please. Sorry.
No, thank you so much. So are we going to forward through the presentation on our own?
You should share your screen.
Very good. Okay.
And say to us what page you're on for those on the telephone to be able to follow along.
So I think I need the host to enable screen sharing. Okay. Okay. So are we all able to see the slide deck?
We're fine, yes.
Very good. Okay. And our slides are numbered in the lower right, as you mentioned. I just want to say it's an honor to be able to visit with you this evening to talk about Ponte Equity's vision for this mixed-use project on Spring Street. Ponte Equities is a longtime builder, owner, and developer of commercial and multifamily housing in the Tribeca neighborhood. Their core business is in ownership, leasing, and management of these properties. They will build to own and retain. And we think that's really important. So, this is a legacy project for them and one that they intend to steward into the community, into the neighborhood, and to be an owner of for the next generation. They built really strong ties in the community. And again, 30 years of construction and ownership plus right in the Tribeca neighborhood. Ponte Equities own the master parcel along the south edge of Spring Street between Renwick and Greenwich. I'm also joined this evening by my partner, Mark McCarthy, who was our design director, and he'll talk a little bit about the design. And then really proud to have Jan Hurd-Picorni on the team. Kurt Hirschberg is a preservation specialist, and he'll walk us through the first class preservation and renovation of 310 that's envisioned. So thank you again for having us this evening. So I'm now moving to slide 3 in the lower right. In the center left is a survey of the property. Again, Ponte Equities owns the entire south side of the block along Spring Street between Greenwich and Renwick. There are 4 properties in total that comprise the master parcel. The 3 long skinny properties that run perpendicular to Spring Street are 25 feet by 75, and 310 is the salmon colored lot kind of in the center of those 3. The first just about 35 feet off of Spring Street from the property line are the existing 3-story structure. About another 30 feet beyond that is a single-story addition that was built sometime after the original construction. And then there's about 15 feet of property left over in the back of the lot. So the lot does bifurcate the overall master parcel. It stretches the entire north to south length of the property. Slide 4. And again, this is starting to think about the neighborhood and the environment. Slide 5. Our firm is very contextually driven, so it was really important to us to spend a lot of time in the neighborhood, understanding the architecture, the types of neighborhood establishments that are there. You see in this illustration, again on slide 5, 310 was originally in 1819 built as a 2-story residential building. In 1869, the 3rd story was added. And then in the really late 1800s, I think 1894, an addition was put in the rear yard. So this development contemplates restoring the single family home back to its 1869 composition. So you'd have the 3 stories. The 1-story manufacturing piece in the back would be demolished. And then that would allow for the development to link in the rear yard of 310. Slides 6, 7, and 8, we really had some fun taking 2D pictures and assembling them to create the elevations along Greenwich, Spring Street, and Renwick. We think it's really important to study thoughtfully the environs and specifically the character of the architecture that's in the neighborhood. So I'm now on slide 7. On the right, you're seeing the existing 308 Spring Street that would be demolished to make way for the development. Slide 8, on the left, 511 Greenwich is also part of the one of the buildings that would be demolished. Slide 9, just making a footnote about the really rich language of both contemporary and historical buildings in this neighborhood. It feels like a neighborhood. It's very walkable. And our aim is to make a community neighborhood centric building that really knits itself in with the community in this part of Tribeca. So I'm moving now to slide 11. And slide 12 is our rooftop site plan. And as was described earlier, just to the east along Renwick and to the west at Greenwich and Spring are 10 stories of new development that's proposed that would straddle 310 Spring. There's a very narrow, actually a corridor that would link together those two 10-story elements of the development. And they're right off the back of 310, actually 10 feet proposed off the back of 310 that would link the overall development. Now, slide 13, we really wanted to focus for a minute on the ground level and how we think is a thoughtful addition to the neighborhood. On the Renwick side, right where the E is in Renwick would be the main entrance to the residential development. There's a 2-story element that looks down to the lower level to activate some of the amenity spaces there. 310 would remain and be, would be renovated to become and restored as a 3-story triplex single family home. It would be part of the overall development, but the bar and tavern that's there today would go away, and the 3-story structure would be completely renovated to offer a 3-story home along Spring Street. Now, the last component on the ground floor is the retail element in blue. It is almost 3,000 feet. We worked hard to let the retail have a single aggregate footprint so that it's most flexible for any uses that come over the next several decades in terms of its neighborhood retail use. So one other footnote, Renwick is the highest elevation of the site. It's about 2 feet higher in elevation than Greenwich. And by having the retail footprint on its own, it's able to float and really engage with the sidewalk level. So its elevation or floor plan will be at this elevation of the sidewalk. Really important for strong retail. Slide 14 is a really quick overview of the zoning application. You know, and again, I think there's other elements to talk about this evening, but we are intending to make an as of right application to the city, to your board, and to Landmarks next month. We are focusing on a residential development. This zone permits both retail and residential. So the ground level 3,000 foot space will comprise the mixed use or the commercial element, and then the rest of the development is intended to be market rate multifamily housing. We worked hard to push the dormers. Those are above the base height, so floors 8, 9, and 10, to push the dormers away from 310. So the dormer along Renwick is slid back to the south, and then the dormer along Spring is slid over to the west, again, to give 310 some breathing room. Mark, has my partner, Mark McCarthy, been able to rejoin the?
Yeah, I hope I did.
As a presenter? Okay, Mark, I'd be grateful if you could, you know, walk us through sort of the architectural character and our thoughts about how we approach that.
Sure. So I'm going to speak specifically about the new part of the construction, and Kurt will talk specifically about 310. But I think we work closely with our client and take from them the inspiration for our design. And as Armand alluded to, they're a group that's been in the neighborhood for a long time, long-term owners. I guess I would say trendy is not their MO. And we talked about that. We looked at buildings with them, and always were drawn to it's a bit more traditionally simple. So the is very
We've lost your sound.
warm brick language that punched windows.
I can't hear.
We've lost the sound.
Mark, I think your connection is not so good.
Okay, I'm gonna
Hi, can you guys hear me now?
Better,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, I think maybe my headphones were not working so well. So the building's quite simple in its palette of materials. It's largely a masonry language, so a traditional full brick in a gray mix with a punched window language. Of course, we wanted it something to be of its time, but in many ways, looking at some historical cues in how we developed the language. We worked a lot on the module, so you can see in a subtle way that the building is broken up along Spring Street on a more or less 25-foot module, which is similar to 310, which gives it a nice rhythm. And then the grid is really very repetitive, and the windows are then adjusted and will, according to the plan, which we'll see in some of the next few slides. I do want to point out at this point, you can see a strong contrast between the sort of the base or the body of the building and that bridge or corridor element that that passes across the back of the property of 310. And in this case, it's a very light, the bridge is sort of the name we've chosen for the project. And it's a very much lighter and as transparent as we can, as code will allow. And you can see that there's sort of a 50-50. And as you get up higher, it gets more and more transparent. Next slide. And these are the Greenwich and the Renwick elevations. The Renwick, the larger of the two, very much repeats. And then we use the language of balconies to signify some entry points along each side and to kind of break down the scale of the building. So a lot of what we talk about is sort of the base, middle, and top, and you'll see that in our presentation. So at this point, what we're looking at as inspiration, so not necessarily meant to be that we're copying any one of these, but something that feels sort of like a black iron traditional storefront is what we're looking at the first floor. The second floor is actually residential, but in this case, we've chose to, because of the overall scale of the building, to have the masonry kind of make a larger gesture at the first two floors, which felt proportional. And you can start to see, while it's a modern building and doesn't pick up all the lines of 310, it does feel like it's not completely out of place in the neighborhood.
Transitioning now from slide 17 to 18.
Oh, thank you. And here's the mid-level. So a couple of things we introduce is we do have some Juliet balconies, which is just a very simple glass railing that inserts into the opening. So it's a very subtle feeling. We didn't want to break up the overall kind of rhythm of the building and the simplicity of it. And the other thing is, and occasionally, particularly when in plan, those areas that are bedrooms and the windows a bit smaller, we introduce something that's sort of reminiscent of the shutter-like detail on 310, or that would have been typical for the neighborhood historically. So you'll see that come in that same module that the windows have, as well as recognizing a kind of corbelling of the brick along the line that aligns with the cornice of 310.
Now slide 19.
Thank you. And then as we get to the top 8, 9, and 10th floor, it gets a little bit more abstract. These are the penthouse, the larger units that have rooftop terraces. This is working as Armand had shown. We worked with the dormer regulations for zoning to create this kind of massing. So the building, while the material stays very, very constant, it gets a bit more abstract as it gets closer to the sky.
Chanel, could I interrupt for?
Yes, what? Somebody just spoke.
Yes. Can I interrupt, please?
Could we finish the presentation? Is it just details?
None of this concerns us. We are concerned only with lot 34, which is an individual historic monument.
Right, we understand that, but this is what surrounds it and very much affects it, which is why it's being presented.
I disagree.
All right,
Mark, I think we're almost ready to transition
Continue.
back to Kurt to talk about 310 Spring, and if you just want to conclude on the finishes.
We are,
or the,
yes.
you know,
Yeah, it just.
I think it would be
since we're
easier
doing
if,
this all virtually, we can't be there with you in person.
okay, I think it'd be easier since it's in such segments that I clear up some of the notes for what we just had while it's fresh on everybody's mind. The first question is demolishing the buildings. Is that part of this application?
So just to clarify, the 3-story historic home that you see in the center of this image 14 would
We're
remain.
familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, would remain and would be.
We understand that. The buildings that
Okay.
would be demolished, I'm asking about, is that part of this application? Demolishing the buildings.
So the buildings that currently exist on either side of 310, yes, are proposed for demolition to make way for this overall development.
Okay, so as part of this application, not a separate one.
Correct.
Okay. You spoke of as of right, you mean the FRA and the bulk and so forth of the new
Yes,
buildings?
sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir. We're not
And-
seeking any variances of any kind to.
I understand. And what material is the storefront? Is that steel and glass?
It
The
would be.
mullions and the cornice and so forth.
Okay, let me just go to that. Which illustration?
Oh, this one in the black between the storefronts of the apartments and the divisions between the windows. Is
Correct.
that metal?
It's a metal and glass pre-manufactured custom window wall infill.
Okay, so everything's metal. Okay, that was just unclear.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, please go ahead with the next section.
I just want to mention that a lot of times in these buildings, the dormers on the upper levels could be a secondary material, and part of sort of the enduring timelessness of a Ponte Equities buildings is to continue with the brick language up to the sky. So again, this
Okay.
is a building that we intend to own indefinitely, and those kinds of decisions are being
I
baked into
understand that, yes.
the
Okay,
job
thank you.
from today. So I'm turning it over to Kurt Hirschberg from Jan Hurt Picorni, and he'll walk us through all the details involved in the preservation and restoration of the building.
Thank you. As part of the bridge project, the historic Dennison and Lydia Wood House at 310 Spring Street will receive a first-class exterior restoration. As Armand mentioned before, it was originally constructed as a 2-story residence in 1819, and then it was significantly enlarged in 1869 with the addition of a 3rd floor and the addition of a commercial storefront business. It was modified again between 1892 and 1894 with the addition of a rear extension. And the plan as part of this work is to reunify this structure to be a single-family residence once again. So it's not only restoring the building, but it's also restoring the use back. The front facade restoration will include removal of the 1/1 vinyl sash, restoration of the historic wood frames, which are still intact with much of their trim still in place, and fabrication of new wood 6/6 sash replicating typical 19th century details. Restoration of the 1869 storefront with in-kind replacement of deteriorated or missing elements, and replication of period appropriate entry door and transom. Selective repair and repointing of the brick facade. One thing that's very important that we're going to preserve as part of that, when they added the 3rd floor in 1869, they actually changed the coursing pattern of the brick. And that's a detail that we're going to preserve as part of this work. Repair and or replacement in kind of the brownstone lintels and sills. There's several that are actually beyond the point of repair and we have to replace them. Replication of the deteriorated cornice to match the existing details. replication of the historic brick stoop with iron railing following details noted in early photographs, restoration of the existing apartment entry door and transom, which you'll see on the right-hand side of the elevation, and new wood shutters replicating typical mid-19th century details. Next slide, please. The rear facade will have the extension removed. Extension is currently in very poor condition, and it's really a detrimental feature to the back of the building. And the plan is to restore the rear facade back to its appearance in 1869. Currently, which you'll see in some photos shortly, there are multiple layers of asphalt siding that have been applied to the rear facade on the second and third floors. Those will be removed and the original brick facade will be restored. The window openings as part of this work will be infilled with brick, and new iron fire shutters will be replicated and installed. We have some examples of the original 19th century fire shutters that are in storage in the building, and we're going to be using those as a model. And we also have some of the original mounting hardware still on the facade. Next slide, please. The detailing of the windows, shutters, and related hardware are a significant part of the first class restoration. The 1/1 windows that are now are really a detriment to the building. Those are going to come out. We're going to match typical 19th century details for the windows that would have been there. The wood shutters are very typical of what you would see in New York at this time in the mid-19th century. You can also see an elevation of the fire shutter based on the historic example we have. And what is worthy of noting, for example, on the window frames in the front, a lot of the original casework is still there. So we're going to use that as a model for all the new elements that are coming in. Next slide, please. Going back and doing as much historic documentation as we can, we know the original entry stoop was brick. So we're replicating that with bluestone treads and landing. We know what the original wrought iron railings look like based on an early photograph. So we're replicating that detail. And we also have an example lantern here, a recreation of what a typical late 19th century lantern would have looked like. Next slide, please. Although the storefront has received some modifications over the years, there's a significant amount of extant historic material. A lot of the moldings that form the panel design are still intact. Most of the corbelled brackets are original. Most of the cornice on the storefront is original. So those items are going to actually serve as a model for replicating any missing or deteriorated elements. With the exception of the removal of the ATM, which is currently located on the left-hand side of the storefront, and removing the non-historic doorway that's there, largely the appearance of the storefront as it is today is going to remain virtually unchanged. Next slide, please. Here we're looking at a few section details through the storefront. The original cast iron column is going to remain. You'll see on the west side of the storefront, the original shelf, display shelf, was truncated. We're planning on putting that back the way it was originally. And on the interior side, we're going to have a removable curtain assembly that will provide the privacy necessary for that residence, but it'll still maintain the feel of the storefront. Next slide, please. Here we're looking at a horizontal section through the storefront, and you'll see that that display shelf, very much part of keeping that storefront as it is. It's going to maintain the same character it's had since 1869. Next slide. The new door and transom that are going in the storefront are based on the historic details of the extant door that leads into the apartment that's to the west of the storefront. Basically, again, we're following typical 19th century details for the mullions in the window, for the panel details on the door. It'll be very much in keeping with the scale, the proportion, the detailing of the historic door that's in place. Next slide, please. Here we see what that front facade looks like today. You could see the 1/1 windows. You could see how the storefront was partially truncated by the addition of the ATM. And you can also see that very wide, non-historically appropriate, it's almost a barn door-like door leading into the bar currently. Next slide, please. Here we could see the existing configuration of the rear facade. You could see the multiple layers of asphalt siding that are on the second and third floor. And you could see the south facade of that rear extension. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the one thing we've had a very hard time finding is a lot of photographic documentation of 310. The earliest photo we've been able to find is the 1940 tax photo. But what you can see in here is we could see the configuration of the shutters, albeit they're a later variation of a shutter. We could see the true divided light of the windows. We could see the brick stoop. With cleaning up and a little bit of zooming in on the image, we could see the design and configuration of that original wrought iron railing on the stoop. On the left-hand side, you could see what the structure looked like at the time of designation in 2011. Next slide, please. This is the front facade today. You could see at one point they've introduced iron anchors tying back the facade. That entire west bay of the facade had several repairs done over the years, many inappropriate. You could see a dryer vent coming through one of the brownstone lintels. There's heavy mortar loss in some areas. There are anchors from earlier signage that are intact that have left open gaps in the wall. All that work will be repaired. You can see the condition on the center photo on the left of the existing cornice. Unfortunately, at this point, it's really only viable as a model for replicating new components. It's heavily rotted, but there are enough pieces there that we know what it was and we can replicate it 100%. Next slide, please. Here you could see the rear facade. You could see there are at least 3 to 4 layers of asphalt siding that has been applied to the rear. Again, the same 1/1 vinyl sash windows. And you can also get a feel for the condition of that extension at the rear. The brick facade is in very poor condition. They're loose bricks falling out. But what is worthy of noting, you can actually see the anchors for the fire shutters. And there are also anchors on the upper facade as well. Next slide, please. Here's some additional details showing that asphalt siding. And you can also see how much that rear yard is truncated with that small, narrow portion at the very end on the south side, which is all that remains of the rear yard. Next slide, please. As part of our documentation, we were very concerned to figure out the evolution of the building. And this is one of the studies we did looking at that rear extension and trying to document when it was installed. And we know, looking at historic maps, it wasn't there in 1891, but it was there in 1894. So we have a very good feeling of when that came in. Next slide, please. Knowing that we didn't have a lot of historic photos, or really any historic photos for that matter, of 310, we spent a good deal of time looking at other buildings, and these are other buildings within a block on either side, just to get a feel for what the neighborhood, a feel for details, starting to see how things were changing, where people were doing upgrades and improvements, just to inform where we had voids in historic documentation for 310, just to ensure that it was in keeping with what you would see in that neighborhood at that period of time.
Kurt, are you comfortable with your?
Okay, may I again, just to bring the notes up to date, please, with a few details. The shutters that are proposed appear to be much wider than the photograph. Is that the case, or?
They are going to be true functional shutters, so they will close.
Okay, they're correct. Okay, it's just the drawing.
Yes.
And the material for the cornice, please.
The cornice is wood.
And it's being reproduced in wood.
That is correct.
Good, thank you. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
So this is heading into our last chapter. It focuses on the location of the bridge, which the project is named after. In this illustration, I'm on slide 39. You can see again the 3-story home where it says 310, and then and it's in a kind of a green tone, and then a lime green or a more vibrant green is the rear yard, and then in blue is the bridge that's zipping across the rear part of the 310 property and linking together the two-story elements that flank. And so this is a 3D extrapolation that shows the same condition. Again, the dormers are pushed to the side to the extent that was possible. And one of the qualities that we're chasing is purposefully for the bridge to have its own glassy architectural language, so that when you're walking by on Spring Street and you happen to look over 310, which can only happen from the north side of the block, you would see what appears to be a neighboring glass building on the next property. This is on slide 41, a section through 310, and then the rear yard of 310. And so you see here that the existing 3-story structure is 32 feet approximately in depth. We have a 10-foot offset, and then the bridge itself which is 8 feet in width. We really like this approach because it leaves 25 feet of south orientation plaza space or community space for the development and the individuals that live in the building. In this particular placement of the bridge, on the south elevation, which is the right side of the bridge, there are no limitations to the glazing. So it can be entirely glass. And again, because it's south facing, it'll have a sort of a cannon effect to let the sunlight through. On the north side or the left side of the bridge, we're allowed to have 45% openings. And then in this scheme, the 9th and the 10th floor would be entirely transparent on both levels. We're tinkering with this idea that we could put skylights in the floor of the plaza to get natural daylight down into the main lobby space. And again, as Kurt described, the approach is to do a first-class restoration of the rear facade of 310 and have that be a feature element both within our lobby of the residential lobby of the development, and then also upstairs you would see it from the bridge as you walk by. Again, a lot of thought and testing went into finding the recommended location for the bridge, and we feel like this takes advantage of all the qualities in terms of natural daylight, making a rational floor plan for the overall development, and celebrating 310 as kind of a jewel behind glass, if you will. Mark, if you wanted to just share your thoughts about this idea of the glassy element feeling like a neighboring building behind.
Yeah, I think you said that well, Armand. Our intention was, as this rendering shows, which would be 5 feet above the sidewalk directly across, so on the north side of Spring Street, looking directly at 310, how much of that bridge you would see and how far back it would appear. And just we have a view from each corner. So from the northwest corner of Spring and Greenwich, you don't see the bridge at all, as well as the next slide. So from the northeast corner of Renwick and Spring, again, only in the mid-block do you start to see that bridge at all. So this is a diagram that shows you the extent of the north sidewalk that you would be able to see. First, see a hint of the bridge in the distance across the block, and you can see that in either diagram just to the right of the plan. And then finally, some renderings we did based on Google Street Views, how you would see, in this case, we took the existing sidewalk tree out just so you could see clearly the relationship of 310 to the new development.
So these are the last couple of slides in our presentation, and we're really proud of this image. It really portrays the building knitted into the neighborhood, being sort of making an offering to the neighborhood that's not there today, and being an enduring complement to the neighborhood. One of the things I just wanted to point out is we as architects, we look at this building in 2 dimensions and from far away, and we're always seeing the top and the middle and the base. But this is sort of a wonder experiential image that puts you in the neighborhood. And this is what we're really sharing with you, and the vision that we have for the project is the pedestrian experience along Spring Street. And then this is the other corner from Greenwich and Spring, and you're seeing just to the left of the tree the 310 as the jewel that's punctuating the experience along Spring Street. Thanks so much for letting us share again Ponte Equity's vision for the development along Spring Street in Tribeca. We'd love to answer any questions that you have and to follow up.
Okay, first, if you could go back to slide 41, just to clarify a couple things, please. I'm mainly concerned about how it relates to the 310. There's clear that on the left side, the white at the bottom is the cellar of 310. And then adjacent to that is not part of 310's as developed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so 310 really cuts off at the back of the building, and its entire, with the demolition open space, is given over to the new construction.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? Can you see my cursor?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't now.
Okay. So the plan is to remove the non-structural elements of the existing cellar of 310 and to maintain its, not to exceed, I believe it's 9 foot 11 inches of ceiling height in that cellar. It'll probably be storage for the single family, triplex element or use that the building will have. And then as you're pointing out, directly adjacent would be the cellar proper of the overall development. And that is
right. So if you were to isolate the row house 310, its new property line, as it were, is the back of the building.
Correct. It's a 75-foot deep lot. So from the right side to the left is the property.
The 32 feet is devoted to the historic house, and the rest of it is given over to various aspects of the new development.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I think it would be easiest if the members of the committee would just call their names and I'll recognize you so we're not talking over each other. Who wants to speak first?
Hi, Chanel, this is Bo. Can I say something?
Yes. Okay,
I
go.
wonder, can I see, I joined a little late and I apologize. Can I see a view of exactly what the existing condition is and what you propose to demolish?
So this is an existing conditions 2D photo montage along Spring Street.
Are you able to make that any bigger? Are you able to increase the size?
Well, do you have a picture?
Where I'm
of
going to
it?
lose my, let me see.
That's not a picture, that's a diagram. Do you have a picture, an actual picture of what's there?
Yeah, can you see, that's what I'm sharing. Can you see the slide 6?
You must have a better photo than that. I mean, I can barely see what it is. I see a lot of dotted lines, but I can't see what's in there. You see can I see the facades of the buildings?
So this is the documentation that we have of the existing buildings along Spring Street and Renwick. So you're seeing this is one of the buildings to be demolished that's around the corner on Renwick, and then the smaller one-story building that's along Greenwich, okay, in Spring, And then the illustration I was showing earlier shows all three of the buildings that are slated for demolition in this application. And then of course, 310 Spring sort of left center would remain.
So to be clear, you're demolishing 308 Spring?
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you what the occupancy is of 308 Spring? Currently?
I can share with you that, yeah, I can share with you that it's a residential building, but I don't know the details and I could report back on that.
Well, and it's very important to know if it's residential, how many units would be lost, what the status of those tenants are, if they're rent stabilized. I mean,
Well, that we can't, that's interesting, but it's not part of this. It's something that can enter into the subjective part.
all
But
right, thank you.
this was the first thing to bring up, certainly.
Okay, but
Can you at least describe 311 or
Okay,
511 Greenwich and 312 Spring?
yeah, no, I understand that, Chanel. I appreciate that. But just, I mean, I really would like to see a picture of what these actual buildings look like. And
Yeah,
it's great. It's just a picture, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're opining
I'm
on whether or
agreeing.
not you're allowed to demolish these buildings, and you haven't provided a picture of it. It's kind of,
what I'm asking is, can you make this slide bigger so we can see more detail?
I don't think those buildings are landmarked. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I think, yeah, exactly. I just looked it up. The only building that's landmarked is 310 Spring Street. And that is a very 1819 it's from that period. The one on the left is, a stone tenement building, but it's not protected from landmarks. It's not a landmark district. It's an individual landmark that they're
Yeah.
preserving.
We
so
understand that,
the
yeah.
application here has to do with an individual landmark that they want, that's being demolished or altered in the case of
Is being
310
preserved.
No,
That's what
none
the
of the,
presentation was on, was the
310 Spring.
preservation.
So we're talking about 310 Spring.
Just a moment. I think that it was misinformed that this demolition is before us.
Yeah, this is
We
Susan.
can
I think we really
can
need
discuss it.
clarification on what exactly is before us, and what it is that we are entitled to opine on here.
And how it affects the
whether the
landmark building.
demolition is or is not part of this application.
may I speak, Chanel?
Yeah,
Yes, can
Albert.
you hear me?
Albert,
Okay. I read the designation report this afternoon, and it says very specifically that it is this lot number 34 on Spring Street, but it includes the entire lot. So all of the space, the 40 feet behind the house, are part of our consideration. One question I have is, how close is that glass tower to the rear of 310 Spring? It's your answer.
We're proposing that it starts 10
could you
feet
show
away
us slide 41, please? That's the clearest illustration of what Albert's speaking about.
If I could just take a moment to clarify one piece. I may have misunderstood the question in the very beginning of the presentation. So this is not an application to demolish. That the demolition of the three adjacent buildings is, I believe, is an as of right allowance because these are not landmark buildings or sites.
Yes, that's what I was trying to clarify. So
Yeah,
you're
so
correct.
I apologize if
Okay.
I misunderstood the question, but I wanted to clarify that. Happy to go to slide 41.
I just suggest that it's the clearest to show what Albert's asking. Oop.
Yes, there we go.
Yes. Yeah. So, go ahead.
Everything behind 310 is within our jurisdiction. May I ask the applicant if you've had any dealings with the Landmarks Commission on this project?
Kirk, did you want to answer that, or would you like me to? We've had preliminary workshops with the project manager and one of the preservationists. And we, as part of the due diligence, we were first coming to meet with this board this evening. And then we're hopeful, with your blessing, we would meet with the landmarks commissioners in January.
Okay, there, if I may observe, there seem to be several structures in that 40-foot stretch behind number 310, which I believe would be within our purview.
There's one structure in that space behind the original 32-foot depth of 310. There's a single-story rear addition, which was an expansion of the commercial space, which you could see it's right back here. It's very poor construction. It's in very poor condition.
And that is to be demolished.
That is to be removed, correct.
And again, the glass tower, which gives your project its name, the bridge, there will be a 10-foot empty space there between the bridge and the 310. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What
Oh,
I'm still concerned with is on that previous slide, there seem to be very complicated structures. There.
In this slide.
What
Yeah, I
is
mean,
all of that to the south of 310 and south of the bridge?
I'm sorry, are you making a comment, or, I mean, it's
No,
pretty-
that's my question. I don't understand what all of that is.
Yeah, so the ground floor in the rear yard of 310 would be the main lobby for the development. So the main desk is actually depicted in this element here, and it would use the restored rear facade of 310 as its main focal element from within the lobby. And then upstairs is where the bridge itself would occur, beginning on the second floor through the 10th floor. And again, the bridge would be as glassy as possible. So you would sort of really see and appreciate the restored 310 historic home, along with the new the metal window shutters that would also be historic in their language that Kurt talked about, and really celebrate every time you go back and forth through the corridor 310. And then the space to the south, and again, we like the way where this location of the bridge renders an outdoor space that would get as much sort of south-facing light as possible. And this again would be the full width of the landmark site, 25 feet. And you can see we've suggested that there could be soft seating and plantings and so on to really animate that space.
So that fills the space to the south property line, correct?
Let me, so I'm not sure, you mean back here?
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand it. It kills it?
No, it fills it.
Oh,
It goes all the way to the back of the property line, yes.
no, it's all, this is the footprint of the outdoor plaza space that would be behind the bridge in this area. So it's directly behind the blue bridge, and then in this illustration, it's on the right side.
That's what I'm talking about.
So, and again, I can go back to one of the early slides that.
Can I say something, please? I think what we're being asked to do is, how do we feel about the waterfall directly behind this building. That's the main feature that is on the landmark property and its position on the property. But I mean, I see that as the main thing we have to opine on, as we say.
Absolutely correct. Are there further questions about the backyard or the space to the rear of the house?
Yes, I have questions.
Yeah, okay, please.
So, well, first question is on the original house. It does look like it slopes to the side, which is very strange. And where does that water go in the restored building?
Kurt, I believe our plan is to collect it and drain it into the new building and
In
get it
what way do you
stormwater.
mean slopes in one direction? The roof?
Okay, if you look, if you show the front elevation once again, there's a definite slope from one side of the front elevation to the other side. And
Yes.
downspout. Yes, there it's quite.
Now,
clear.
it's actually a little deceiving. There is a slight pitch to that roof as well. So it's a hip roof that meets in the center of the depth of 310. But there is a pronounced slope that goes towards the east side of the building. And that has always been there.
Okay, so how are you getting rid of that water on the east side?
It's actually, there are leaders there now, and we would replicate that detail, or it can be tied into internal drains inside the building.
Okay. All right, so it's going to be a single family home, but you're going to retain the storefront of the bar as if it was still a shop. Is that correct?
That is correct. The storefront is a very early modification in the history of the building, and it's very character defining to the building and its designation.
Okay, and the rear addition to the house, when was that added to the house?
It was added between 1892 and 1894.
And so why wouldn't that be considered part of the landmark designation?
It's a very interesting structure in that it doesn't have any detail. It's not seen from the public right of way. It was constructed solely to increase the commercial space in that building, and it went up very quickly and very shoddily. It's definitely of an inferior grade of construction, and its condition compared to the condition of the rest of the building reflects that.
Okay, one last question.
May I just point out something in connection with that before you go on?
Yes.
It is not uncommon for us to see extensions that are done in some manner unsuitable to the original building.
That's true, but
the demolished.
But then at the
okay, go on,
time,
please.
at the time of designation, that's included, I think, in marking the house as a landmark. The last question is about the truncated back of the house. It's being restored as a blank wall. If I understood you correctly, the window openings are all filled in, bricked in, and the metal shutters are permanently closed over the opening, at least for appearance sake.
That is correct. And the brick would be set inward, so you would still have a reveal where the windows were historically, but it would be a solid wall.
Okay, and that's because, I mean, why wouldn't you want windows on that side for the sake of the single family residence?
We actually looked at it from a few standpoints, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, they were code limitations to leaving those as windows, I believe as well, correct?
Kurt, I was just going to share that. So the depth of the building is not unsimilar to the depth of an apartment style layout. And the way that we're proposing to organize or reorganize the plan inside the row house is to have the stairs and the sort of the poche elements at the back of the plan. So, the idea is to leave as much of the windows open on Spring Street as possible and to sort of leverage the plan in that manner. When we looked at layouts, it really didn't pop up as a deficiency to have to close off that rear facade.
May I speak?
What does that mean? A deficiency?
Well, when we use our lens to review the layout, is it a space where people would want to live?
Oh, you mean from the
Is it-
utilization point of view? Okay, that's clear. Sandy?
Could you explain the bridge? Does it have a function?
Yes, so let me just go back. So the idea is that all of the core elements of the development, so the stairs, sorry, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the stairs and the elevator cores are in this southwest interior quadrant of the site, which is the least desirable part of the property. And the idea is that the bridge links across the rear yard of 310 and allows for access into the Renwick side of the development. So we're really able to have all windows on Renwick, Spring, and then wrapping around on Greenwich, and as large of homes as the floor plan will support. So we're not congested behind the Spring Street facade with elevators and stairs. They're pulled into the back of the development in this area.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
So it
okay.
serves as egress for the people in the Renwick building.
That's exactly right.
Are there further questions from the committee?
Yes, this is Susan. I have a couple of things.
Okay.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway, if you have any kind of rendering of the bridge at night, because anything that's glass, presents very differently at night than it does during the day. And given the fact that, albeit it is from a relatively small section of Spring Street, it still is highly visible from that section and illuminated at night, the effect, we were kind of selling the bridge on its lack of visibility in a way and the transparency of it, but that all changes very much when it's nighttime. And I'm wondering if there is any, if you have a rendering of what that might look like at night.
We're happy to work on that. I don't have that prepared for you this evening.
And can you tell us what
And
the illumination is proposed for inside that bridge so that we can, in absence of a rendering, imagine?
Hey, Armand, this is Mark.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Hi. We don't have that. We can do that. I would just add that it is only the corridor. So we have a minimum of lighting we need for code because it's egress,
Exactly.
but it's not anyone's home. There's no living space on that, off of that. So it doesn't need to be overly lit.
But it needs to be sufficiently lit. So
It
anyway,
does.
it'd be good to
Yeah.
know.
But there's been no discussion to light it up from the exterior or to celebrate it with lighting.
Yeah, it'll celebrate itself well enough once, even with the minimal lighting. All right, thanks. I also, it's
And we
interesting.
did talk about
Okay,
I
can
was
we
just
move
gonna
on with
share,
Susan's
we did talk-
question?
Oh, I did have another, it's an interesting, you know, you've got 1819, 1869, and 1892 stories being told here. And, you know, obviously the 1869 storefront is very interesting and tells the narrative of the building. And yet now it won't be a storefront. So there's a sort of an interesting problem of a kind of a disconnect within the narrative because the use will change. And I'm wondering, I don't think I got a clear enough sense of what is proposed for that storefront that allows it, that what will it look like when people are living there? You know, how do
Okay.
we know what that appears to be once people are living there? And can you explain that?
I can. This is something we went back and forth with a good deal and had several conversations with the staff of the Landmarks Commission. We looked at treating it solely as like a diorama where it had a complete infill wall on the back that only had access to allow you to get in there and clean and do maintenance. And what we've gone back and forth and what we finally opted to do is to do a curtain on the inside so that it can be open. You can get daylight in there. It would be very nice light in a space, but they're going to be very large picture windows.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem.
You know, it's how do you block it without blocking it too much?
Yeah.
Kurt, another strategy to layer in might be a two-tiered curtain so that the lower part where you have visual, you know, direct visual access can be closed and we can let natural daylight in from above. So I'm really excited about this curtain strategy. I think it's a way that the tenant can decide how much or how private they want to make the space.
Exactly, so that it's not a permanent structure, it's a curtain.
Right.
And the tenant can also decide, I don't want curtains. I want a nice big piece of glass that I can look out onto on the street. And so I, passing by, can look into their living room or parlor.
Okay, I think this is all clear. Are there other
I
points?
did have another question about the 1892 rear addition, which I know you're somewhat dismissing as a commercial addition, but given the scope of your project, you know, that's not necessarily a fair criticism. But was there ever any discussion with Landmarks about restoring that 1892 structure rather than demolishing?
We actually, part of what triggered doing our research on that, including Landmark staff, felt that that addition was considerably newer than what it was. The general consensus of almost everyone on the team was it was from the 1920s, including Landmark staff.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard you say 1892.
It is 1892, but it does not look like 1892. And the only reason why we know it was built between 1892 and 1894 is we see two New York City maps. It's not on the 1891 map, but it is on the 1894 map. So we know that structure was there, but it's not in keeping with the design detailing of the building. And it looks very much like a 1920s commercial edition, where the 1819 versus 1869, there's virtually nothing with the exception of the brick and the window openings on the second floor remaining from the 1819 building. What you see when you look at it is 1869. That's when that third floor was added. That's when the second door was added to the west, and that's when the storefront came in.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions from the committee? Josh and Susan, if you would keep sight now, are there members of the board who are not on the committee who would like to speak? Okay, would you promote Sarah, please? She'll speak and followed by members of the public. And I'll speak about how this works once Sarah has spoken.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
You're fine.
Yeah, so interesting listening to all this. And while most of this project lies outside of the landmarked lot, the part that does lie within would seem to have a very, very large visual impact on this federal house. It seems it would be vastly preferable for there to be no connector between the two large buildings, which seem to be swallowing this federal house on the landmarks lot, or if there was one, for it to be low enough that it can't be seen or it is minimally visible from the street, which shouldn't be that hard to achieve. Also, I mean, this is the perfect picture. It looks like the building is being swallowed. So we can only comment on a landmarked lot, but wow. So that's me. I'm done.
May I ask a question?
Janelle?
Yes, Mark, go ahead, please.
I have a question about the the bridge again. If I heard before, it crosses over the back of the landmark property, would that not make it part of this application and part of the purview of the decision to be rendered by this committee? Because I think there is some concern about its visibility. That's question number one. Question number two, which I think you can answer as well. Would this be subject to any land use review if you're building a bridge over the property, or is that as of right and requires no further review? So is it only a landmark issue, or is there more than that?
It's our understanding that this would be an as of right part of the development, with the exception of the landmarks consent. So we're calling it a bridge, but it's essentially a corridor, and it complies with zoning and building code regulations in the city.
So it does require approval by this community board as part of the landmark application. Is that correct?
So
Well, I'll
that's
answer
how-
that, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was not clear initially. Thank you.
Eugene would like to speak.
Speak, Eugene.
Thanks. I guess I had another, I guess going back to the, I guess rear of the building again. Is there any way that setback can be more than the 10 feet? Is it strictly because all the mechanicals are in that quadrant, and so that you can't set it back any more than 10 feet from that building? I mean, and I guess the other question is, how does one access that lobby space? I mean, so whoever's living in the building cannot look out to the back. Is that right? There's nothing, there's no windows, there's no view to the back at all at this point. No door. The house is
Let me go
stopped.
back to the ground floor plan. So there is a very generous open space at the corner of Renwick and Spring. And indeed, you would actually walk along a bridge within the lobby that overlooks the two-story space down into the lower level. And then you'd make your way to the lobby proper where the front desk is. So, and that's correct. So our utility services coming in from Renwick, move in and move out and so on would all happen in this utility service corridor behind the lobby.
And okay, so you would go over this bridge, you're saying, and then you would go down to the lobby?
So the bridge is only experienced up starting on the second floor. So at the ground floor, you're seeing the restored back of 310 as sort of the feature element in the lobby.
Right, but what's in the lobby itself? Is that a structure? I see kind of there was like a rendering of a desk or something on one of the side views.
Yeah, so I'll go back now to slide 41. So, oops.
Yeah, that
So,
one.
yeah, so at the end, so you can just see the bridge inside the lobby here in the back, and it is overlooking the two-story space as you come in from Renwick. Then you make your way into the lobby proper. You have the desk or the greeter that's the main entrance, and the main lobby with some soft seating, and then from there you'd be directed down to the amenity package below or upstairs to the corridor and the plaza and other amenity spaces.
I'm sorry, where's this bridge? Is it in the 10-foot space or the 8-foot space? The bridge from Renwick.
Yeah, the 8-foot space is the corridor link or the bridge that connects the two 10-story elements.
But the way to get to Renwick is the 10-foot corridor.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I wonder if we could sum this up while this drawing is up by saying that effectively, for what we're considering, is that the landmark chopped off at the back of the building, and that the garden, if the additions taken away, is given over to the new development. I'm sorry, I didn't see other members of the committee. Has the committee finished? Okay, we'll now go to the public, and they'll be recognized one by one. And when the person recognizes them, just announce the name.
Mm-hmm.
Please raise your hands if you'd like to speak. I see Pete Davies has his hand up. So Pete.
Hi, yes, thank you.
Us.
I just have a question about the foundation of the wood house. Clearly, it appears that there will be a lot of excavation on 3 sides of it. Could you tell us what the condition, what the foundation is made of, what the condition is there, and what the plan is for excavation in a way that will not harm the individual landmark? Thank you.
So our detailed engineering analysis is underway. The existing foundation is partially concrete and partially the original stone foundation. This would be really carefully documented. There would be either underpinning or other stabilization measures to make sure that the landmark is not disturbed, the original cellar itself. So we will have additional consultants on the team that will address that very specifically. And we understand how important it is to protect the landmark and make sure that construction has minimal disturbance to the structure.
Thank you. The next person, please.
It doesn't look like anybody else would like to speak. There are no other raised hands. Is that correct?
Okay.
Could that be correct? It appears to be.
Hands if there are.
There are no. Oh, yes.
One more. Yep.
There's one more. Please go ahead, Stash.
Hi, I'd like to make a couple of comments about this proposal.
I'm sorry, what is your name, please?
My name is Stash Zakshevsky.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess one of the first comments I have about the project, I'd like to just go back to the slide that is showing the street plan on Spring Street and Renwick. Yeah, this one. So, I think it's really, really important Jane Jacobs has taught us about the importance of community, of creating a variation of different spaces and residential and retail. And one of the things I noticed about this project is it has kind of got a face or ignored Renwick Street. It seems to me that it has a double height space on the street and a lobby and utilities on Renwick Street. And I'm concerned about the lack of life on that, in that area, that it's important to create more function, more areas that give a little bit of street life to Renwick Street.
I'm afraid that this comes of what we discussed earlier, that the Renwick Street property is not something that we can consider here.
Well, I think we
Because
have
it's
to
not-
consider, we have to consider.
How it affects the landmark building, we can consider.
Right. I mean, I think that it's important. I mean, I've lived in a residential building in the West Village for many years before I moved to this area, Hudson Square. I know it was labeled as Tribeca earlier on, but it's actually Hudson Square. But it's important to consider these older buildings and especially the areas that are within the whole lot of the building. And I think it's important that we look at the rest of this building, that the committee visit this building to see these other features, because a lot of times we do have interesting features in the back of these buildings that are worth keeping. And this building definitely does, it's dwarfed by this huge development. That brings me to my next question, which is, you know, earlier on in the presentation, there was a lot of discussions about this project being contextual. And one of the issues with some of the different projects in this area is that,
again, sir, it's varying from the issue of the landmark building and its property. We understand your concern, and we in fact share it. It's not something that we can consider here.
well, the bridge is on all of the time.
That we can very much consider, and yes.
Not only that, but the property behind this landmark property is going to get built upon someday, and it will change the nature of these renderings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else with a raised hand.
Okay, I just want to ensure before we start the business section that, and members of the committee have all the information that we need together with the materials to for our discussion. If so, thank you to the presenters for the presentation, and we'll take just a breath.
Eugene, yes, please.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Could I just ask one question about the commercial space? I was just looking back on the existing structure. So it looks like there's like a vault in front of the commercial space. Is that going to be retained, or is that just going to be filled in? The one in front of the storefront.
Could you just direct us to the image that you're commenting?
Yeah, hold on. I think I saw it on the designation report. Right, so if you look at slide, the one with tax photo, is that slide 32? Yeah. You can see right next to the stairs, right, there's a vault. you know, kind of very typical, you know, so you can access the cellar for the commercial. Not the text photo, I guess, the one on the right.
Yes, there is a sidewalk vault with a stair down into the basement there.
And that will just, what will happen to that?
That would
sidewalk
go
vault?
away.
Yeah, as part of our builder's pavement plan, we would infill that and restore the sidewalk.
Okay, and then the door, I'm just a little confused about the storefront. The door to the storefront will also be infilled, right? So that's the existing storefront door.
The existing
Right,
storefront door remains a door.
Into the unit?
Armand, if you could go one slide ahead. So if you look there, that multicolored striped door with the square window, it's a very large access door now. So that door opening gets reduced, and we're going to replicate the door to the west that goes into the apartment. That's an original door. So we're going to replicate the detailing of that door in the proportion. And then, so it's going to be a smaller, narrower door with casing and a transom above. So it would match what the original store entry was in 1869.
But is that now, and since there's no floor plan, I guess it's difficult to see, but that would be the entrance to the apartment then?
That would be the entrance to the
story
apartment.
home? And then what about the door on the right?
You're going to have two entry doors.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Okay, I believe that was all. Susan, do you agree that everyone has spoken who wishes to?
Yes, there are no other raised hands.
Okay.
Susan, Chanel, can I just ask one quick question? Is that storefront, is the I don't know what you call that, the area above the plate glass, that the sort of like a I really can't tell if that's a canopy or if it's a
or
you know, is it a I can't think of the word right now, but is that remaining or at least being added to the new facade, or because I see it's three-dimensional?
Above that glass there's a flat panel. Actually, if we can go back to the drawings, there's an elevation drawing of that. It's a flat panel with raised molding profiles right there. Go ahead, forward. One more. Here we go. So it's all flat casework. Then they're raised moldings that created a panel detail. And then there are dentils across and a cornice with a small roof on it.
So there is a cornice, and the cornice is the protrusion of like about a foot or so. Is that right?
Actually, if you go to the next slide, you could see that in cross section. So your very first image here, drawing number 1, that shows the projection of that cornice in relation to the projection of the storefront.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can I ask one other question about this doorway?
Please, let's try to wrap up the questions as time's moving on. Yes, go ahead,
All I
Sandy.
want to know is the door now that exists there, is it kind of indented like the old storefronts where?
No, it is not. It is flush.
It's flush. Okay.
Can I ask just one more quick question? Sorry, Chanel. I'm looking at slide 22, and it says part of the restoration, there will be LPT approved storefront lighting. So there's going to be lighting in those big plate glass windows. Is that correct?
Yes, there would be lighting inside of some kind, and that we're just not at the point of resolving that yet.
But it's not a store, right? I mean,
no, it is not a store.
So what's to stop someone on the sidewalk thinking it's a store and just trying to walk in that apartment? I mean, it looks very much like a storefront.
I really think that when you have the residential window treatment and no signage of any kind, you know, the curtains that we talked about earlier, you won't feel an invitation to, you know, to come and just kind of walk in to the space.
Well, then
and-
why are you
and again-
installing storefront?
Okay,
Why
this
are you
has been,
installing
this has
storefront
been spoken about 3 or 4 times, and I think it's clear that it,
Is it clear glass
Yes.
in the storefront?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, can we
Okay.
move on now to the business session? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Your materials handy if we need to look at something. And Susan, if you could now confine the participants to the committee, and Carter will move on. Okay, are we ready? Susan, are you ready?
Sorry, just checking. Hang on one sec.
Okay. Again, without you.
Yes, the applicants are no longer participants.
Okay.
I mean, panelists.
Okay, and the committee are all here in an order. It's clear what to write about what the application is, and it's perfectly proper to mention the whole context and what the buildings are, and the fact that the buildings themselves, irrespective of the corridor, have a great impact on the landmark structure. Could we begin with the restoration of the facade?
Chanel, you're talking about the facade of the landmark buildings, right?
Yes.
Street facade.
We're going to discuss only the landmark building until we get to the back
Right.
garden, which is amalgamation of the two.
You know, I think they've completely destroyed the landmark building. I mean, you don't even notice it anymore. I mean, ridiculous idea to have lights to depict store windows that aren't store windows. It's Disneyland. It's like the Provincetown Playhouse or the other monstrosity that NYU created. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It becomes more of a Pushkin village by taking away the back, which we'll get to later.
That's right.
But it strikes me as the thing that we often have of doing such a wonderful job on the facade, anything else goes. I mean, it happens time and again with the back of row houses.
Right.
Right. So in terms of your question, Chenault, I don't think anybody can fault the restoration of the existing facade to the condition or the appearance and the quality that it was at the time of designation. So, I mean, I think they have done their work in terms of restoring the facade.
And I don't believe that they actually showed you how, in what an incredible state of deterioration that street facade is.
Yeah, it's very rough, very bad.
It is a mess.
So we agree that the restoration they're planning is excellent.
Yeah. Does anybody disagree, have anything about the restoration itself? And there's Bo's point about, and as Susan brought it up more concretely, of I think of two buildings, one on 4th Street and 10th or 11th, no, 11th or Charles or Perry, and there is a similar situation of
Chanel, you keep going out.
oh, sorry, I'm going to kill my camera. There are two situations in the West Village, and they're both in cases where the garage was filled in by a window of some sort, an expansive window, and the curtains are closed, and it looks like a closed store all the time. Others want to speak about the front.
Well, it did bring to mind, there is one, I don't know, maybe between Fifth Avenue and University or somewhere over there on 10th or 11th or somewhere in that neighborhood. I go by it fairly often. What they have done is they put in a partial wall behind the storefront, and they have a swing in the front window. Big.
It never looks like a storefront.
Swing.
Okay.
That's called the red light district, I think.
Brian, have you been swinging on that swing?
Yes.
Oh, I did get to swing on it once when
All right, now we're all up front. That's okay.
We do expect the members of the.
I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know which building you're talking about.
The storefront of 310.
I get that. He was talking about something else.
Oh, on Lovett Street. Oh, I don't know.
We'll visit the swing when it comes
Sarah
before
wants
us.
to know where the swing is.
Yeah, because she wants to go. Okay.
I would say
is there anything more about the house apart from the rear facade? Okay.
The rear facade and the rear structure. The big elephant.
Okay, let's
the big
move
one.
out one by one because they affect each other. We've spoken about the fact that the windows are blocked up. Further, if one's removing the extension, then reasonably there would have been windows on the ground floor in the rear, and there are not even any windows blocked up there. Indeed, there's not any exposed surface.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Could I say, I just find that really odd.
These are points to make.
It's just, it's
to my
like,
mind,
like in our
we're making points why it's not acceptable.
Well, yeah, I would like to make a real blunt statement about it. Having sat through so many of these presentations where the slightest deviation from a back wall, original facade and so forth was looked at in talking about in historic districts and not even his individual landmarks, that any kind of modification back there was not considered proper. And I'm looking at this one, and it's so obvious, it hits me right in the face that, okay, what they're doing is they're truncating it at a back wall, and everything else is obliterated and totally changed from what it was. I don't see how the historic nature of the building is preserved at all.
Yeah, I couldn't
Indeed,
agree
the
with
back
Brian.
wall
I
is
couldn't agree
destroyed
with
as well.
Brian more, and I think that treatment totally disrespects the original building, and it disfavors respect for the original building in order to provide a backdrop for the lobby, which then becomes almost like scenery.
It's not just a backdrop for the lobby, but it's also for that design they have with the bridge. I mean, is the bridge.
Okay, we're going to move on to the
property?
bridge in a moment.
No, can I, about the rear facade? The one thing I want to point out is they did keep what what is the old stair window location, which we've lost almost everywhere. So I just want to point that out. This little tiny row house had a switchback stair, so all the windows are off the floor to floor height, and I think that's really great that that's preserved, because it says a lot about how these houses were organized. And also how small these houses were. I mean, it is a historic building, and we've got this tiny, tiny little house, which in today's market or in today's world, we don't even need the whole back windows. That's we've come a long way, maybe, or not. So that's a problem. Yeah.
Okay. I think we explored overly thoroughly the history of the extension and why it's there and why it appears it was built in the 1800s and modified later. Are we opposed to its not being restored as a full lot, a virtually full lot? There's a few feet left.
Yeah.
It's a sort of a mini demolition permission.
Isn't some of their structure on the original property of 310?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're talking
Yes,
about
it all is.
the existing extension.
Yeah, the rear yard, it's 35 plus 8, whatever that is, 42 feet. It's the backyard is bigger than the actual house.
Uh-huh.
32 feet. The house is only 32 feet. 1819.
The question is there objection to demolishing the existing rear addition?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what would you have in place of it?
Either
what would you have done with it?
either restore what was there or leave it as an open backyard.
Okay, that's demolishing then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I would restore that extension on the back and the small yard that was behind that.
There is a small space. There's 10 feet of empty space.
But it's not a,
between the roof.
it's
So when the extension is gone, there will be 10 feet between the rear facade of the house and the back property line.
There would be a question if it's going to be residential of how much was required back there, which is probably more than 10 feet.
Well, it's 30. That's why they closed it off. Because they're not getting any light and air from the backyard.
Right.
but is the house going to have access to that back? I mean, there's
No,
no
that's
door.
the whole
right?
point.
They don't have access at all, right?
No.
Let's leave this a moment and move on to what we think will be permitted to be done with the backyard in relationship to the new building. If we want the lot to stay intact, the answer is nothing. And if we want to say that there can be some way of crossing over, then there's some sort of an accommodation for that.
Well, can I jump in here? I think Sarah's comment really struck a chord with me. The way the new building is detailed and massed around this tiny, tiny little row house makes it like disappear in this huge, it's overwhelming. There could have been ways where it responded to the height of this little federal style and sort of didn't make it such a canyon. And I thought that was a good point.
Yes, it swallows 310.
And how do we
And-
fit that into the landmark question of what is and isn't landmark?
If I may say, the bridge that gives this whole project its name, the all glass tower couldn't possibly be more intrusive and inappropriate, if I may use that word.
You may.
Yeah, I am hard pressed to think of any landmark building that has allowed a superstructure, a contemporary structure to be built over the, in place of the back and over the back and over on the top of it. And it's just totally overwhelming it. So
The only, I'm sorry, the only thing I could think of that is that kind of anything in the backyard is when occasionally a carriage house has been joined to a main house with some sort of a breezeway.
Well, this is like a 10-story waterfall coming down on this little building. I mean,
Okay,
graphically,
we're recommending denial for the bridge.
Yes.
Is that
Yes,
the
it
upshot of
totally
all this?
upstages, it totally upstages the landmarked property, which is already, you know, being overwhelmed by the massing of the as of right, proposed as of right buildings around it. So, you know, it doesn't need more, doesn't need anything else to upstage it.
And it's not as though it's on the lot behind, it's on the landmark property.
Also, and I think, you know, we have to remember that the justification for it is in order to enable the elevator to be placed
in the least
in,
desirable.
you know, it's an exterior structure that exists in order to, you know, I mean, if I were the developer, I'd feel the same way, in order to maximize the amount of usable interior space, but that's not our issue. Our issue is landmarks. And there's no question that this upstages the property, and, you know, why? So that the elevator doesn't have to be placed inconveniently for the proposed building.
And joining that as part of the same question of intrusion is the outdoor space that doesn't pretend to be a garden to the house.
Right,
The rest of the outdoor, the rest of the property.
right.
yeah, Chanel, you know, wasn't it just last week? Well, it seems like last week, it may have been last month on Broadway. We had a landmark building that was, they proposed a penthouse addition, and behind it on a non-landmarked and not in a historic district was another property that was connected with it in the back and to a side street. And one little corner of that new building addition was layered on top of the historic building. And we said, no, sorry, you can't do
Right.
it. And I mean, here, what are we doing here? We're plopping down the back of this whole 10-story building.
There's no question about it.
Shouldn't that be our lead objection, that they're,
Well, it is
okay,
so far.
Excuse me, Brian was talking about 827, 831 Broadway, where they didn't landmark 47 12th East
Right.
12th Street, which is part of the building. Yeah, okay, just saying.
Is anyone else familiar with the Helmsley Hotel on Park Avenue behind the Villard Mansion, which is behind St. Patrick's?
yes.
It's the same, exactly the same, except with a more aggressive
Overhang or whatever.
not to mention
Yeah.
the scale is somewhat different, but it's the thing that immediately came to mind from that.
You're talking about the Villard houses?
Yeah, and the hotel behind them.
Right.
The Helmsley, mhm,
Oh,
Well, the owner can get what she wants.
always. What else? Are
Or
we
the
wrapping up here?
The outdoors, that's what we're trying to do. The outdoor space between the bridge and the property line.
It's a moot point, I think.
Yep.
If we allow that bridge, then why wouldn't we allow that outdoor space on the roof? But
We don't want it.
that's not the main point.
Right. That's right. I agree.
Well, and I think it's on the basis of the house is not just a house, it's a lot. And that lot expresses something about the time in which it was built. So there's a historic reason to protect it and not, I keep thinking of the Guggenheim, where those architects built like a toilet tank on Frank Lloyd Wright's beautiful round exhibit hall. I didn't like that one either. That I thought was a very poor addition. This is almost like building something on top of our building, and it takes away from the historic value.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, yes.
And is all of this together not saying that we want to deny taking over the garden area with or without an extension of the house with structures relating to the new buildings?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes.
I don't even think the extension is that important because I don't think it's important. I think it'd be almost more important to express the actual size of the yard that would have been when they built it before it became a store. They've turned it into a residence, but they've obliterated, it's still set up like a store with the one full extension in the back. So I don't care about the back extension. Get rid of it, keep it, doesn't matter to me.
It would also
me.
be turning the rear into the original condition.
Yes.
May I make one suggestion? That you refer to the house as the Dennison Wood House. He was the shipmaster who built the two-story structure in 1818, 1819. Dennison Wood. That'll make us
right.
sound really good.
I think that's great.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Al. That's a good point.
And we had a name of the house for the merchant house as well,
Right.
which my
Yes.
spell
Ooh
check
la
wouldn't
la.
recognize. Okay, we're approving the front. We're denying the, and are we okay on the demolition of the extension?
I am. I don't care.
Okay, does anybody
fine.
object to that, provided that the garden is left as a garden?
Mhm.
Right.
Well,
That
then we would
proviso,
have to
I'm
say-
fine with it.
And then we would say, and restoring the rear facade.
Right.
Yes. Which includes things like having the windows open and having windows on the ground floor.
Right.
And it's certainly reasonable to imagine what the back lower floor was. There are plenty of intact examples.
Now, because it's an individual landmark, would that prevent them from adding an extension to the old house? Because right now they haven't really filled, they have a very tiny house on a lot that could take more. So I just put that in the mixer. Because they would probably come back and want a bigger house.
I would think that a separate application could ask for an extension.
Right.
And the individual is always treated with great care. So perhaps in this case, it would be more tea house than a
right.
the first two floors that we sometimes permit.
Well, listen, it's very exciting to see a house this old because you can really see even the 10 years where 1829, the building boom on Bleecker and all those, they are bigger. They're very small little refinements, but it's really fascinating as we train our eyes to appreciate it. It's pretty cool.
And this was built on the edge of a swamp.
Right.
I recommend reading the landmarks designation report.
I have it. I've got it in front of me.
Okay.
I'll start reading for everyone.
And also, my suggestion is that we remain silent on how to solve the problem that we've created.
It would be too much.
I mean, it doesn't seem to me it's up to us for the applicant to be able to join the two properties across the land.
We might also want to say that that in any event, it should be pushed further back. In any event. I mean, I don't know if we want to get into that, but right now it's literally almost in the living room. It's so close. Whereas it could be pushed back further and maybe it would have a little less impact.
Well, yeah, but we don't know that until we're presented with it.
Exactly. That's not our problem to solve. It's not appropriate.
We try to avoid alternate or modified as just example with the merchant's house. And there was another one recently that we had a really good idea of how to solve it, but we felt
Always
that
a mistake.
putting it forward, for example,
I-
a one-story breezeway through the garden would dilute our garden position, though it might be not unattractive and work. It's clear that the thing is to try to avoid putting an elevator.
Well, let them come back if they want to
And
change
that's not
it.
our problem, right?
Right.
So we're pretty much, just finally to sum it up, front is okay. Garden should be exposed by tearing down by demolition of the extension, and the garden should be preserved as part of the landmark property, or the landmark lot, I suppose is better to say. And the rear facade should be restored in a historic manner. And perhaps to deny any intrusion on it.
I have a quick question. Does the foundation, I mean, do we care about the cellar space? Is that if they fill it in, or, I mean, are they splitting the cellar space right now, or is that just not within the purview of landmarks?
I don't think we can demand that the backyard be an earthen garden with no openness below it.
No, I just mean underneath. I mean the cellar, the foundation of the building.
Oh,
right,
that may be worth mentioning because it was essentially incorporated into the.
Yeah, I mean it's also truncated at the 30 whatever foot. I mean I don't know if it was originally. I guess it did stop there. I don't know.
Oh, it surely stopped there, and the cellar stopped there, and this all is new excavations. That was sort of hedged when we had the question that it might be used by the occupants of that for storage, which suggested it was more communal property, that they might let them use it.
For those who are interested, Anita just dropped the designation report into the chat in response to Donna Raftery's request for it. So it's there if anybody wants it.
Absolutely sent to Donna.
Okay. Are there any omitted? It's okay. It's okay if the camera's off, the mic is off. Sorry, I had to turn away. I'm back. Are Are there any other points that want to be included? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Yep.
And you all missed,
That's right.
you all missed the new president's speech.
It will come again and again.
And again, and again, and again.
Happy New
Okay.
Year. We need a new year.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Albert, you look like a ghost. You have a very ghosty,
Playing with the light, but there.
oh, better. That's, oh, that
that's a
beautiful
lot
face.
better.
Now we can
Okay.
see you. Jazz hands.
Okay.
Good night,
And
everybody.
Night
Thank you,
all.
Susan, for your doing what you did.